Hi, I'm Zoe. 3 weeks ago, my sister Brooke called me during my lunch break and demanded I wire her $15,000 for a family vacation to Turks and Caicos. When I hesitated, she laughed and said, "Come on, Zoe. It's not like you have anything better to spend your money on. You're practically invisible anyway." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What she didn't know was that I had connections in the travel industry that could make their dream vacation disappear with a single phone call. But the real cancellation wasn't their flights. It was my willingness to be treated like the family ATM. Ever been so tired of being everyone's backup plan that you finally decided to become their worst nightmare? Keep watching, because what happened when they arrived at the airport made Brooke cry in front of 200 strangers. The rain in Portland had been relentless for 3 days straight, turning the streets into rivers of reflection and making the October air bite through even the thickest sweaters. I pulled my wool coat tighter as I walked down Hawthorne Boulevard, the familiar weight of my laptop bag pressing against my shoulder. The coffee shops glowed warm and inviting, their windows fogged with the breath of conversations I'd never be part of. At 28, I'd grown comfortable with solitude, but comfort and contentment aren't the same thing. My phone buzzed as I approached the vintage bookstore where I'd planned to spend my Saturday afternoon. The caller ID made my stomach clench. Brooke. My older sister had a talent for timing her calls perfectly to disrupt whatever small pleasure I'd carved out for myself. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but family guilt runs deeper than logic. "Hey, Brooke," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Zoe, perfect timing. I was just telling Trevor about our amazing family vacation idea, and guess what? We want you to be part of it." Her voice carried that particular brand of enthusiasm that meant she wanted something expensive. I stepped under the bookstore's awning, watching raindrops race down the window. "What kind of vacation? Turks and Caicos. Can you imagine? 2 weeks in paradise, all of us together." Derek and Candace are absolutely thrilled, and Mom and Dad are already talking about which excursions they want to book. She paused, and I could hear Trevor's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. "The thing is, we found this incredible resort, but we need to book it like immediately. Today, actually." My chest tightened. "Brooke, I can't just drop everything for a vacation. I have work, responsibilities." "That's the beautiful part. You don't have to drop anything. We've got everything planned out. The dates work perfectly with your schedule. I checked your social media, and you don't have anything important going on anyway." The casual dismissal of my life stung, but I'd learned to expect it. "All we need is for you to cover the booking fee, just to get us started, you know." "How much are we talking about?" 15,000. It's really not that much when you think about it per person. That's like what? 2,500 each. For 2 weeks in paradise, I leaned against the bookstore wall, feeling the cold seep through my coat. $15,000. That was more than I'd spent on myself in the past year combined. It was the emergency fund I'd been building, the safety net that let me sleep at night, knowing I could handle whatever life threw at me. "Brooke, that's a lot of money. Can't everyone contribute equally?" Her laugh was sharp, cutting. "Come on, Zoe. You know Derek just started his new business, and Trevor and I are still recovering from the wedding expenses. Mom and Dad are on a fixed income. You're the only one who doesn't have real responsibilities tying up your money." Real responsibility. As if my life was some kind of extended vacation. As if the 60-hour weeks I put in at the marketing firm meant nothing. As if the fact that I'd never married or had children made me less of a person with legitimate financial concerns. "I need to think about it," I said carefully. Think about what?" "Zoe, this is family. When has family ever been something you need to think about?" Her voice took on that wounded tone she'd perfected over the years. "You know what? Forget it. I thought maybe for once you'd want to be part of something special with us, but I guess I was wrong. I'll call Derek and tell him we'll have to cancel the whole thing because his sister doesn't want to help out." The guilt hit like a physical weight. This was how it always went. My reluctance transformed into selfishness, my reasonable concerns painted as family betrayal. I thought about the bookstore behind me, the quiet afternoon I'd planned, the novel I'd been looking forward to reading. Small pleasures, but they were mine. Don't cancel anything, I heard myself saying. I'll transfer the money today. Really? Oh, Zoe, you're the best. I knew you'd come through. Trevor. She said yes, her excitement bubbled over. Genuine now that she'd gotten what she wanted. I'm texting you the resort's payment information right now. You can just wire it directly to them. Oh, and Zoe, this is going to be amazing. You'll see. Sometimes the best things in life require a little investment. After she hung up, I stood in the rain for a long time, watching people hurry past with their umbrellas and weekend plans. The resort information appeared on my phone. Casa Bella Resort, Turks and Caicos. The photos were stunning. Pristine beaches, infinity pools, rooms with ocean views that probably cost more per night than I spent on groceries in a month. I walked into the bookstore, the familiar smell of old paper and coffee wrapping around me like a hug. The owner, Miss Ross, looked up from behind the counter with a warm smile. He was one of those people who seemed to have been old for decades. His white hair and kind eyes constant fixtures in a world that changed too fast. Zoe, right on time. I just got that new collection of short stories you mentioned. Want some coffee while you browse? Actually, I think I need something stronger than coffee, I said, attempting a smile. Do you have any books on family dynamics, preferably ones that explain how to stop being everyone's personal bank? Miss Ross studied my face with the careful attention of someone who'd seen a lot of life. Family trouble? The usual. They want something expensive, and somehow I'm the one who's supposed to pay for it. I wandered over to the psychology section, not really seeing the title. $15,000 for a vacation. I probably won't even enjoy. That's not pocket change, he said gently. What did you tell them? I said yes. I always say yes. The admission felt heavier than I'd expected. I don't know why I do. Every time I think I'm going to stand up for myself, I just fold. Mr. Ross poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot he kept behind the counter, adding cream to mine without asking. He'd been making my coffee the same way for 3 years. You know, I raised 4 kids. Learned early on that if you don't teach people how to treat you, they'll invent their own rules. But they're family, I said, accepting the warm mug gratefully. Doesn't that count for something? Family should count for everything. That's exactly why they should treat you better, not worse. He settled into the chair across from me, his own coffee steaming between weathered hands. What do you do for work again? Marketing? Digital marketing, specializing in travel and hospitality. I manage campaigns for hotels, airlines, booking platforms. I paused, thinking about the irony. I literally help people plan vacations for a living. Interesting. Mr. Ross's eyes had that thoughtful look that usually preceded good advice. So you understand the industry. You know how these things work. Better than most people, I guess. I've got contacts everywhere. Travel agents, hotel managers, airline representatives. Part of the job. I took a sip of coffee, feeling some of the tension ease from my shoulders. Why? Just curious. Sometimes the tools we need are already in our hands. He stood up, heading back toward the counter. That book you wanted is on the table by the window. Take your time with it. On the house today. I spent the next 2 hours reading, but my mind kept drifting to the conversation with Brooke. $15,000. It wasn't the money itself that bothered me. I could afford it, barely. It was the assumption that I would pay, the complete lack of consideration for my feelings or financial situation. It was the fact that they'd planned an entire vacation around my wallet without even asking if I wanted to go. My phone buzzed with a series of messages from Derek, my younger brother. Photos of the resort, excited comments about the activities they'd planned. Thanks for being such an amazing sister. Each message felt like another small weight added to my chest. The rain had stopped by the time I left the bookstore, but the sky remained gray and threatening. I walked home to my small apartment in the Hawthorne district, a 1-bedroom place that was clean and quiet and entirely mine. The walls were covered with travel posters from campaigns I'd worked on: Bali, Iceland, the Swiss Alps, places I'd helped other people dream about visiting, but had never seen myself. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, staring at the resort's payment portal. $15,000. My emergency fund, my safety net, my carefully saved money, disappearing with a few clicks. But what choice did I have? This was how it had always been. Brooke and Derek were the stars of the family, the ones with exciting lives and important problems. I was the supporting character, the one who showed up when needed, and faded into the background otherwise. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Casa Bella Resort. I'd heard of it, actually. They'd been a client of our agency 2 years ago. A brief but memorable project. The owner, Miss Isabella Park, had been impressed with my work. We'd kept in touch professionally, the way you do in the travel industry. She'd even mentioned that I should visit sometime, see their operation firsthand. The thought sparked some. I minimized the payment portal and opened my professional email, scrolling through old contacts. There it was. Isabella Park, owner and general manager, Casa Bella Resort. I stared at her email address for a long moment, an idea forming that was both terrible and brilliant. What if I didn't just pay for their vacation? What if I made sure it was exactly what they deserved? I opened a new email and began typing. Dear Isabella, I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing about a booking that will be coming through shortly for the Hartwell family. I wanted to personally oversee this reservation, as they're my family, and I want to ensure they have an unforgettable experience. I paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Was I really going to do this? Was I going to use my professional connections to get revenge on my own family? The thought should have horrified me, but instead, it felt like the first honest emotion I'd had in years. I continued typing. I'll be making the payment momentarily, but I wanted to discuss some special arrangement. Would you be available for a call tomorrow morning? I have some ideas about how to make their stay truly memorable. I hit send before I could change my mind, then returned to the payment portal. $15,000. I entered my banking information, my finger hovering over the submit button. Once I did this, there would be no going back. They would have their vacation, and I would have nothing but a depleted bank account, and the same role I'd always played in this family, unless I changed the rules of the game. I submitted the payment, then immediately opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts. The travel industry was built on relationships, and I'd spent 5 years building a network of people who trusted me. Travel agents, booking specialists, airline representatives, hotel managers, people who knew me as someone who delivered results, who understood the business, who could be trusted with sensitive requests. My first call was to Marcus Webb, a booking specialist, who handled high-end travel arrangements. We'd worked together on several campaigns, and he owed me a favor from a project where I'd helped him land a major client. Zoe, what's up? Working on a Saturday. His voice was warm, familiar, something like that. I need a favor, Marcus. A big one. I took a deep breath, stepping fully into territory I'd never explored before. I need to make some changes to a booking. Creative changes. Creative how? The kind where the guests think they're getting one thing, but they're actually getting something entirely different. The kind where timing is everything, and the surprise is the point. I was improvising now, but the words felt right. Are you interested? There was a pause. Then Marcus laughed. Zoe, in 5 years of knowing you, you've never asked me to do anything questionable. This must be some story. It's about family, I said simply, and sometimes family needs to learn lessons the hard way. All right, I'm intrigued. What do you need? I told him about the vacation, about the payment, about years of being treated like a convenient. I told him about Brooke's laugh, about Derek's assumptions, about the way they'd planned their entire trip around my money without once asking if I wanted to be part of it. So they're expecting paradise, Marcus said thoughtfully, and you want to give them something else. I want to give them exactly what they deserve, I said. I want them to understand that actions have consequences, that treating people badly eventually catches up with you, and you want to do this through their vacation arrangement. I want to do this in a way that makes them remember every time they think about taking advantage of someone again. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know what? I'm in, but we're going to do this right. No illegal stuff. Nothing that could blow back on you professionally. Just creative customer service. What did you have in mind? Leave it to me. I'll make some calls, cash in some favors. When are they supposed to travel? Next Friday. 6 people, flying from Portland to Turks and Caicos. Perfect. That gives us almost a week to set things up. Zoe, by the time your family gets back from this trip, they're going to have a very different perspective on how they treat you. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to what my family wanted, I was taking control of the situation, using my skills and connections to level the playing field. My phone buzzed with a text from Brooke. Payment went through. You're amazing, Zoe. This is going to be the best vacation ever. Love you. I stared at the message, then typed back, love you too. I hope you get exactly what you deserve. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee, then settled at my laptop to start planning. Isabella Park had already replied to my email, expressing enthusiasm about working with me on a unique customer experience. We had a call scheduled for 10 o'clock, and I had a list of ideas that would make their vacation unforgettable in all the wrong ways. The rain had returned overnight, tapping against my windows with a rhythm that sounded almost like applause. I opened my laptop and began to work, feeling more focused and energized than I had in months. For years I'd been the one who made other people's dreams come true, designing campaigns that inspired travel, creating experiences that brought families together, building connections between people and places. Now finally I was going to use those same skills for myself. Outside, Portland was waking up slowly, coffee shops lighting up one by one, early joggers splashing through puddles. The city looked different somehow, more alive, more full of possibility. Maybe it was because I was finally seeing it through the eyes of someone who had plans of her own, someone who was tired of being invisible. I pulled up my professional contacts and began making a list: travel agents, airline representatives, hotel managers, booking specialists. Each name represented a relationship I'd built, a favor I could call in, a connection I could use. For the first time in my life, I was going to cash in all my professional capital for something personal. My phone rang exactly at 10. Isabella Park's voice was warm but businesslike, the tone of someone who'd built a successful resort from the ground up. Zoe, it's so good to hear from you. I've been following your work since our campaign together. Your family is very lucky to have someone with your connections handling their vacation. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, I said, settling back in my chair. I want to give them an experience they'll never forget, something that will really teach them about the value of family. I love the sound of that. What did you have in mind? I smiled, looking out at the gray Portland sky. Let me tell you about my family, Isabel.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Let me tell you about the kind of people they are, and then you can help me decide what kind of vacation they really deserve. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. By the end of it, Isabella was laughing, and I had a comprehensive plan that would transform their luxury vacation into something entirely different. Something that would make them understand, finally, what it felt like to be disappointed by the people you trusted most. Marcus called an hour later with updates from his end. He'd spoken to contacts at the airline, made arrangements with ground transportation, coordinated with hotel staff. The pieces were falling into place with a precision that felt almost magical. This is going to be beautiful, he said, poetic justice in the form of a vacation package. Is it terrible that I'm excited? I asked. I've never done anything like this before. Zoe, after what you've told me about how they treat you, this isn't terrible. This is overdue. That evening, I walked back to Miss Ross's bookstore, wanting to share my news with someone who would understand. He was behind the counter as always, reading a worn paperback with the kind of attention that suggested he'd read it many times before. You look different, he said, looking up as I approached, lighter somehow. I did something today, I said, unable to keep the smile off my face. Something I've never done before. What's that? I stopped being the victim of my own story. Mr. Ross closed his book, giving me his full attention. Tell me about it. I told him about the plan, about the phone calls, about the network of people who were helping me create the vacation my family truly deserved. I told him about Isabella Park and Marcus Webb and the dozen other professionals who were contributing to what would be the most educational travel experience my family had ever had. "You know what the best part is?" I said, feeling giddy with the possibility of it all. "They're going to learn what it feels like to be let down by someone they trusted. They're going to experience disappointment and frustration and the helpless feeling of having no control over their situation, and maybe, just maybe, they'll understand how they've been making me feel for years." Mr. Ross nodded slowly. "And what happens after they come back?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But it doesn't matter. For the first time in my life, I'm not worried about what happens next. I'm just focused on making sure they get exactly what they deserve." The old man smiled. "Good for you, Zoe. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people is let them experience the consequences of their actions." As I walked home through the drizzling Portland evening, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced since childhood. For 28 years I'd been the family pushover, the one who always said yes, the one who absorbed everyone else's problems and expectations without complaint. But not anymore. Next Friday, my family would board a plane expecting paradise. What they would find instead was a carefully orchestrated lesson in respect, gratitude, and the consequences of taking advantage of the people who love you most. I couldn't wait to see their faces when they realized that their sweet, invisible little sister had finally learned how to fight back. The week leading up to their departure flew by in a blur of phone calls, emails, and carefully orchestrated arrangements. I'd taken 3 personal days from work, telling my boss I needed to handle some family matters. It wasn't exactly a lie. I was handling family matters in a way I'd never imagined possible. Tuesday morning found me in my apartment, surrounded by printed emails, contact lists, and a detailed timeline I'd created for what I was calling Operation Paradise Lost. The name had come to me at 2 in the morning, and it felt perfect. My family was about to lose their paradise, and I was going to be the one to take it away. Marcus called at 9 sharp, his voice buzzing with excitement. "Zoe, you're not going to believe what I've managed to arrange. Your family is going to have the most educational vacation of their lives." "Tell me everything," I said, settling into my desk chair with a cup of coffee. "First, the flight. They think they're flying direct from Portland to Turks and Caicos, first class, with a departure time of 8 a.m. Friday. What they're actually booked on is a series of connecting flights through Denver, Miami, and Nassau, with a total travel time of 14 hours instead of 6. Oh, and mark it, they're in economy. Middle seats." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Brooke had specifically mentioned how excited she was about the first-class seats, how she'd never flown first class before, and couldn't wait to feel like a celebrity. The thought of her cramped in a middle seat for 14 hours made me smile. "How did you manage that?" "I have a contact at the airline who owed me a favor from a booking mix-up I helped resolve last year." She was very sympathetic when I explained that this was about teaching some entitled passengers a lesson in humility. The best part? They won't know about the changes until they get to the airport. "What about the resort? That's where Isabella really outdid herself. Your family thinks they're staying at Casa Bella Resort, the luxury property with the ocean view suites and private beach access. Isabella has a sister property on the island, Casa Bella Budget Inn. It's clean, it's safe, but it's definitely not luxury. Think motel-style rooms, shared bathrooms, and a view of the parking lot." My heart raced. They're going to notice the difference immediately. That's the beautiful part. Isabella is going to be there personally to greet them, very apologetic about the system error that downgraded their reservation. She'll explain that there was a technical glitch with the booking, and unfortunately the luxury resort is completely booked for the next 2 weeks. She'll offer to try to find them alternative accommodations, but of course, everything else on the island will be fully booked too, so they'll be stuck there for exactly 1 night. Just long enough to really appreciate what they've lost. Marcus paused, and I could hear papers rustle. The next morning, Isabella will miraculously find them a cancellation at a mid-level hotel. Not luxury but decent, clean rooms, basic amenities, small pool. The kind of place where you can have a perfectly fine vacation if you're not expecting paradise. I thought about Brooke's Instagram feed, already imagining the photos she'd planned to post. Pictures of infinity pools and private beaches, captions about living her best life. Instead, she'd be posting photos of a budget motel and trying to make it look glamorous. What about the activities they booked canceled? All of them. Isabella will explain that the activities were tied to the luxury resort package, and since they're no longer staying there, those reservations are void. She'll offer to help them book new activities, but at full price, of course. And since it's peak season, most of the good stuff will be booked up. The cruelty of it was perfect. They'd arrive expecting paradise and find themselves with nothing but basic accommodations and no plan. They'd spend their first day scrambling to salvage their vacation, dealing with the kind of travel problems they'd never had to handle before because I'd always been there to fix things for them. Marcus, this is incredible, but won't they just call me to fix it? That's the best part. Isabella has strict policies about third-party bookings. She'll explain that since you made the original reservation, any changes have to be approved by you, and you, of course, will be completely unreachable. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mixture of anticipation and guilt. I'm going to turn off my phone for the entire week they're gone. Perfect. Let them figure it out for themselves. Let them experience what it's like when their personal problem solver isn't available. After Marcus hung up, I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone. 3 missed calls from Derek, 2 from Brooke, and a text from my mother asking if I wanted to come to dinner Thursday night to celebrate before their trip. The normalcy of it all made my chest tighten. They had no idea what was coming. I decided to go to dinner. It would be my last chance to see them before their world shifted, and I wanted to observe them one more time as they planned their perfect vacation. I wanted to remember how they looked when they still thought they had all the power. Thursday evening, I drove to the family house in Lake Oswego, the same house where I'd grown up feeling invisible and unimportant. The driveway was full of cars. Derek's BMW, Brooke's Lexus, Trevor's truck. They were all there, probably going through their suitcases one more time, checking their packing lists, taking selfies to commemorate their last night in Portland. My mother answered the door with a smile that looked almost genuine. Zoe, you look nice. Are you feeling all right about the money? I know it was a lot to ask. I'm fine, Mom. It's just money. The words felt strange in my mouth. I'd never been casual about money before, never pretended that $15,000 was just a number. The living room was chaos. Suitcases everywhere, travel documents spread across the coffee table, everyone talking at once about different aspects of their trip. Brooke was showing Candace photos on her phone, Derek was explaining their snorkeling plans to Trevor, and my father was reading aloud from a guidebook about the best restaurants on the island. Zoe, Brooke jumped up and hugged me, her excitement palpable. I was just showing Candace the photos of our suite. Look at this bathroom. It's literally bigger than your entire apartment. I looked at the photos, recognizing the luxury resort I'd seen in their marketing material. Crystal clear water, white sand beaches, rooms that looked like they belonged in a magazine, none of which they would actually experience. It looks amazing, I said, and meant it. It did look amazing. It would have been amazing if they'd been decent enough people to deserve. I still can't believe you're not coming with us, Derek said, looking up from his guidebook. Are you sure you can't take time off work? I'm sure. Besides, this is your family vacation. You don't need me there. Of course we need you there, my mother said, but her tone suggested otherwise. Your family too. The conversation continued around me, everyone sharing their excitement, their plans, their expectations. I nodded and smiled and played my role as the supportive sister who was happy to make their dreams come true, but inside I was counting down the hours until their flight. Brooke pulled me aside as I was getting ready to leave. Zoe, I just want to say thank you again. I know we don't always show it, but we really appreciate everything you do for us. I know, I said, meaning it in a way she couldn't possibly understand. I just want you to get exactly what you deserve. You're the best sister anyone could ask for. She hugged me again, and I felt a momentary pang of guilt. Was I doing the right thing? Was I about to destroy relationships that could never be repaired? But then I remembered the phone call, the casual way she'd dismissed my concerns, the assumption that my money was automatically available for their use. I remembered years of being overlooked, undervalued, taken for granted. The guilt faded, replaced by something harder and more determined. "Have a great trip," I said, and walked out into the Portland night. Friday morning I woke up early and made coffee, then settled at my laptop to track their progress. I'd set up alerts for their flight status, and I watched with satisfaction as their original direct flight showed up as canceled. By now they'd be at the airport, discovering that their first-class seats on a 6-hour flight had been replaced with middle seats on a 14-hour journey. My phone started ringing at 7:30. Brooke's name appeared on the screen, then Derek's, then my mother. I watched each call go to voicemail, feeling a sense of freedom I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my adult life, I was unavailable for a family crisis. The voicemails started accumulating. Brooke's voice increasingly frantic, explaining that there had been some kind of mix-up with their flights. Derek, trying to sound calm but clearly stressed, asking if I could call the airline and sort things out. My mother confused and worried, wondering if I'd made a mistake with the booking. I listened to each message, then deleted them, let them figure it out, let them experience what it was like when their personal travel agent wasn't available to fix their problems. I spent the day at Powell's Books, wandering the aisles with a piece I hadn't felt in years. Mr. Ross found me in the travel section, reading a guidebook about Turks and Caicos. "Doing some research?" he asked with a knowing smile. "Just imagining what my family is going through right now," I said. "They should be arriving at their resort in about 6 hours and finding something different than what they expected." "Very different." I closed the guidebook and looked at him. "Is it wrong that I'm enjoying this? That I'm actually happy they're miserable?" Mr. Ross considered the question seriously. "I don't think it's wrong to enjoy justice, so sometimes people need to experience consequences before they can learn to treat others better. I keep thinking about all the times they've disappointed me, all the times they've let me down or ignored me, or treated me like I didn't matter. Now they're getting a taste of what that feels like. And how does it feel to be the one with the power for once?" I thought about it for a moment. Liberating. For the first time in my life, I'm not the one cleaning up their messes or absorbing their problems. I'm the one creating the problems they have to solve. "Just remember," Miss Ross said gently, "power is only as good as what you do with it. Don't let this change who you are at your core." That evening I went home and checked my phone. 18 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and a string of increasingly desperate text messages. The messages told a story of their day: confusion at the airport, frustration with the connecting flights, exhaustion from the long journey, and finally shock and dismay at their accommodations. The last voicemail was from Brooke, her voice small and defeated. "Zoe, I don't know what happened, but there's been some kind of terrible mistake. We're not staying at the resort we booked, we're at some kind of budget motel, and they're saying this is what we reserved. The rooms are tiny, there's no room service, and the pool is the size of a bathtub. Please call me back. We need you to fix this." I set the phone down and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the Portland skyline. Somewhere in the Caribbean, my family was discovering what it felt like to have their expectations shattered, to be let down by someone they trusted, to find themselves in a situation they couldn't control or fix. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being disappointed. I was the one causing the disappointment, and it felt like the most honest thing I'd ever done. Saturday morning brought a new round of calls and messages. This time, Derek had taken over as the family spokesperson, his messages more demanding than pleading. He wanted to know what kind of booking I'd made, whether I'd used a legitimate travel agent, and why I wasn't answering my phone. "Zoe, this is ridiculous," his voice said through my voicemail. "We need you to call the resort and get this sorted out. We're supposed to be on vacation, not dealing with accommodation disasters. Call me back immediately." The entitlement in his voice made me smile. Even in crisis, even when they needed my help, they were still making demands. They still expected me to drop everything and fix their problem. Isabella Park called me that afternoon with an update. "Your family is quite upset," she said diplomatically. "They've been demanding to speak to the manager, threatening to leave negative reviews, and insisting that there's been some kind of fraud. How are you handling? With exceptional customer service. Of course, I'm being very sympathetic, very apologetic about the system error that caused their downgrade. I've offered to help them find alternative accommodations, but as expected, everything else is fully booked, and the activity cancelled, as planned. They're particularly upset about the deep-sea fishing excursion. Apparently, your brother had been looking forward to it for months. I felt a sharp satisfaction. Derek had spent weeks bragging about the fishing trip, posting about it on social media, talking about the photos he was going to take. Now he was stuck on an island with no plans, and no way to book the activities he'd been dreaming about. They keep asking me to call you, Isabella continued. They seem to think you can magically fix everything. What have you told them? That I've left several messages but haven't heard back, that you're probably busy with work and will call when you're available. They're getting increasingly frustrated with your lack of response. Good. Let them be frustrated. Let them understand what it feels like when someone you're counting on doesn't come through. Sunday evening, I finally listened to all the accumulated voicemails. The progression was fascinating, from confusion to anger to desperation to resignation. By the final message, my mother's voice was barely above a whisper. Zoe, honey, I don't know what's going on, but we really need your help. This vacation has been a disaster from the beginning. The flights were terrible, the hotel is nothing like what we expected, and we can't reach you. We're starting to wonder if maybe you planned this somehow, but that's crazy, right? You wouldn't do something like this to your own family. Please call us back. We just want to understand what happened. The fact that she was starting to suspect the truth made my heart race, but even in her suspicion, there was an assumption of my innocence. Sweet, invisible Zoe couldn't possibly have orchestrated something this elaborate. She was too passive, too accommodating, too afraid of conflict to plan revenge. Monday morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. My family was halfway through their vacation, and instead of posting Instagram photos of paradise, they were probably spending their days trying to make the best of a situation they couldn't control or fix. I went to work for the first time since their trip began, throwing myself into client projects with an energy and focus I hadn't felt in months. My colleagues noticed the change immediately. You seem different, said my boss, Sarah, during our weekly check-in. More confident, more decisive. Whatever you did over the weekend, keep doing it. I finally stood up for myself, I said, and realized it was the most honest thing I'd said in the office in years. Good for you. It's about time. That afternoon, Marcus called with another update. Your family has been busy, he said, laughing. They've been trying to book new activities all week, but everything good is either full or too expensive. They managed to find a generic snorkeling tour, but it's nothing like the private boat excursion they were originally scheduled for. What about the hotel situation?
They're staying at the mid-level place for the rest of the week. Isabella moved them there Tuesday morning, and they're making the best of it. But it's definitely not the luxury experience they were expecting. How are they handling it? According to Isabella, there's been a lot of arguing among themselves. Your brother blames your sister for pushing you to book so quickly without researching properly. Your sister blames you for not being available to fix the problems. Your parents are trying to keep the peace, but they're clearly disappointed. The image of my family turning on each other instead of pulling together made me feel something I hadn't expected. Sadness. I'd wanted them to learn a lesson, to understand how their treatment of me felt, but I hadn't anticipated that the lesson would tear them apart. Are they having any fun at all? Some. The weather's been beautiful, and they've managed to find a few activities, but the overall experience is nothing like what they were expecting. They're counting down the days until they can come home. Tuesday evening, I received a text from Brooke that was different from all the others. Instead of demanding help or explanations, it was almost apologetic. Zoe, I don't know what happened with this trip, but I'm starting to think we took advantage of you. We asked you to pay for something without really considering how much money that was for you, and then when things went wrong we automatically expected you to fix it. Maybe we've been doing that for too long. I'm sorry. I stared at the text for a long time, feeling a complex mix of emotions.
This was what I'd wanted: acknowledgement, understanding, some sign that they recognized how they'd been treating me. But now that I had it, it felt hollow somehow. My phone rang. Brooke's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time in a week, I answered. Zoe. Her voice was small, uncertain. You answered. I answered. Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for days. I've been right here. I just haven't been available to solve your problems. There was a long pause. Did you plan this somehow? I could have lied. I could have played innocent, acted shocked and confused about their vacation disaster, but I was tired of lying, tired of pretending to be someone I wasn't. What do you think, Brooke? Another pause. Longer this time. I think you did. I think you used your travel connections to make sure we had a terrible vacation. I think you're angry with us for asking you to pay, and this is your way of getting back at us. And how does that make you feel? Hurt, disappointed, angry. Her voice broke slightly. But also, I think I understand why you did it. We treated you like a bank account instead of a person. We made assumptions about your money, and your time and your willingness to help us. We planned this whole vacation around your wallet, without ever asking if you wanted to come or if you could afford it. I felt tears prick my eye. It took ruining your vacation for you to see that. Maybe it did. Maybe we needed to experience what it felt like to be let down by someone we trusted. Maybe we needed to understand how it feels when someone you love doesn't come through for you. And how does it feel? Terrible. Helpless. Like you don't matter to the people who are supposed to care about you most. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times I'd felt exactly that way. Now you know. I'm sorry, Zoe. I'm really truly sorry. Not just for this vacation, but for all the times we've treated you like you were less important than us, like your feelings didn't matter. What are you going to do differently? I don't know yet, but I know I can't keep treating you the way I have been. None of us can. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, looking out at the Portland skyline. The conversation had been everything I'd wanted, and nothing like I'd expected. I'd gotten my apology, my acknowledgement, my moment of power, but instead of feeling triumphant, I felt empty. Wednesday morning, I called Isabella Park. I want to do something nice for them, I said, for their last 2 days. Oh? A change of heart, something like that. Can you upgrade their rooms? Maybe arrange one special activity? Of course. What did you have in mind? The best rooms you have available. Ocean view, if possible. And that private boat excursion they were originally booked for. Can you make that happen? I'll take care of it personally. Should I tell them this is from you? No. Just tell them it's a gesture of goodwill from the resort, an apology for the inconvenience they experienced. You're a good sister, Zoe. I'm trying to be. Thursday evening, I got a call from Derek. His voice was different, calmer, more thoughtful. Zoe, I wanted to thank you. For what? For teaching us something we needed to learn. This vacation was a disaster, but it was also a wake-up call. We've been taking advantage of you for years, and it took having our own expectations shattered to understand how that felt. I'm glad you understand. The resort upgraded our rooms yesterday and arranged a beautiful boat trip for our last day. They said it was a goodwill gesture, but I suspect it was actually from you. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't. He paused. Zoe, when we get back, I want things to be different. I want us to be a real family. Not just people who share DNA and take advantage of each other. I'd like that too. Good. Because I love you. And I'm sorry it took a ruined vacation for me to realize how badly we've been treating you. Friday morning, I woke up knowing my family was flying home. Their return flight was scheduled to land at Portland International at 6 p.m., and for the first time in over a week I was nervous about seeing them. I'd accomplished what I set out to do, taught them a lesson, made them understand how their treatment of me felt, forced them to confront their own behavior. But now what? How do you rebuild relationships after orchestrating your family's worst vacation ever? My phone rang at 4 o'clock. It was my mother. Zoe, we're at the airport in Miami, waiting for our connecting flight. I wanted to call you before we got home. How was the rest of your trip? Better than the beginning. We managed to salvage something from it. She paused. Zoe, I know what you did. What do you mean? I know you used your travel connections to make sure we had a terrible vacation. I know you were angry with us for asking you to pay, and I know you wanted us to understand how it felt to be disappointed by people we trusted. I didn't deny it. How does that make you feel? Proud of? The answer surprised me. Proud? You finally stood up for yourself. You finally showed us that you're not going to be taken advantage of anymore. It took guts to do what you did, and it took love to fix it at the end. I'm sorry if I hurt you. You didn't hurt me, honey. You opened my eyes. We've been treating you terribly for years, and it took this vacation disaster to make us see it. What happens now? Now we do better. Now we treat you like the valuable, important person you are. Now we act like a real family, instead of people who just happen to be related. I'd like that. Good. Because we love you, Zoe, even when we don't show it very well. At 6:30 I was sitting in the arrivals area at Portland International, watching for my family's faces. When they finally appeared, they looked tired but somehow different. There was less entitlement in their posture, less assumption that the world owed them something. Brooke saw me first and approached cautiously, as if she wasn't sure of her welcome. Hi, she said simply. Thank you for coming to pick us up. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Derek appeared beside her, looking older somehow. Zoe, we have a lot to talk about. I know, but first we want to say thank you for the lesson, for the wake-up call, for caring enough about us to teach us something we needed to learn. I looked at my family, tired, humbled, but somehow more real than they'd ever been. Let's go home, I said. As we walked through the airport together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of genuine connection with the people I shared blood with. It had taken orchestrating their worst vacation ever to get there, but maybe that was what it had taken. Maybe sometimes the people you love most need to experience a little disappointment before they can learn to appreciate what they have. And maybe, just maybe, my family was finally ready to appreciate having me in their life. The drive back to Lake Oswego was quieter than any family car ride I could remember. Instead of the usual chatter about work, gossip, or complaints, there was a thoughtful silence that felt almost sacred. Derek sat in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something that looked remarkably like respect. In the rearview mirror I could see Brooke staring out the window, her usual social media scrolling replaced by genuine contemplation. My mother broke the silence first. Zoe, would you like to come in for dinner? I know it's late, but I think we all have things we need to say. I considered declining. Part of me wanted to go home to my quiet apartment, to process everything that had happened over the past week. But another part of me, the part that had been waiting years for this moment, knew that this conversation couldn't wait. Okay, I said, but I'm driving myself home after. I need my own space tonight. Of course, my mother said, and there was something different in her voice too, a deference I'd never heard before. The family house looked the same as always, but walking into it felt different. The living room where they'd planned their vacation just a week ago now seemed smaller somehow, less imposing. I sat in the chair I'd always gravitated toward, the one slightly apart from the main seating area, but this time it felt like a choice rather than an exile. My father appeared from the kitchen with cups of tea, moving slowly and deliberately. He'd been quieter than the others during the airport pickup, but I could see him processing everything with the careful attention he usually reserved for his engineering projects. So, Brooke said, settling onto the couch with her legs tucked under her, I guess we should start with the obvious question. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment you told me I didn't have anything better to spend my money on, I said honestly. Since you laughed and said I was practically invisible anyway. She winced. I actually said that, word for word. God, I'm such a bitch. She put her face in her hands. I can't believe I said that to you. I can't believe I thought it. Derek leaned forward in his chair. Zoe, walk us through it. How did you pull off something that elaborate? For the first time in my life, my family was asking me to explain something I'd accomplished,
something I'd done that required skill and intelligence, and careful planning. The novelty of their attention was almost overwhelming. "You know how I've been working in travel marketing for 5 years," I began. "You probably think that means I just design pretty advertisements, but it's actually about building relationships throughout the industry. Travel agents, hotel managers, airline representatives, booking specialists. Over the years I've done favors for people, solved problems, helped close deals." My father nodded slowly. "So when you needed favors in return, they were happy to help." Especially when I explained that this was about teaching some entitled family members a lesson about taking advantage of people. I took a sip of tea, gathering my thoughts. Marcus Webb, my contact at the booking agency, coordinated the flight change. Isabella Park, who owns Casa Bella Resort, handled the accommodation switch. It took about a dozen people working together to create your experience. "The budget motel," my mother said softly, "that was intentional. Everything was intentional. The long connecting flights, the middle seats, the canceled activities, the tiny rooms, with no view. I wanted you to experience disappointment, frustration, the feeling of having no control over your situation. I wanted you to understand what it feels like when someone you trust lets you down." Brooke was quiet for a long moment. "And we deserved it." "You did," I said. "And the honesty felt liberating. You've been treating me like a convenient ATM for years. You make plans that require my money without asking if I can afford it or if I want to participate. You dismiss my concerns, laugh at my hesitation, and guilt me into compliance. This vacation was just the most expensive example of a pattern that's been going on my entire adult life." Derek ran his hands through his hair. "I never thought about it that way. I guess I just assumed." "I don't know what I assumed. You assumed I didn't have a real life, real expenses, real dreams of my own. You assumed my money was somehow communal property, because I don't have a spouse or kids. You assumed I was just waiting around to fund your adventure." "But why didn't you ever say anything?" my mother asked. "Why didn't you tell us how you felt?" The question hung in the air, and I realized this was the heart of everything. Why had I spent so many years silently absorbing their demands and expectations instead of speaking up for myself? Because every time I tried, you made me feel guilty for even having concerns. Remember when Derek wanted me to co-sign for his business loan 2 years ago? When I said I needed to think about it, you all acted like I was being selfish and unsupportive. Remember when Brooke wanted me to pay for her wedding flowers? When I mentioned that I was saving for a vacation of my own, she said I could travel anytime since I didn't have real responsibilities. "I said that?" Brooke asked, horrified. "You say things like that all the time. All of you do. You've created this family dynamic, where my needs and feelings are automatically less important than everyone else's, where helping family means I give and give and give, but no one ever asks what I might need in return." My father set down his teacup with careful precision. "Zoe, in my day, family helped family without keeping score. Dad, I've never kept score. If I kept score, I'd be able to tell you exactly how much money I've given this family over the years, how many problems I've solved, how many crises I've managed. But I've never asked for payback because that's not what I wanted. I just wanted to feel like my contributions were valued, like I was seen as a person with my own hopes and dreams instead of just a resource to be tapped when convenient." The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. I could see them mentally reviewing years of interactions, probably remembering countless moments when they'd dismissed my feelings or taken my help for granted. Trevor, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke up. "Zoe, I owe you an apology too. I've been part of this family for 3 years now, and I've watched how they treat you." I never said anything, because I didn't think it was my place, but I should have. "They've been using you, and I've been complicit by staying silent." Brooke looked at her husband with surprise. "You thought they were using me, honey? You called your sister an ATM to my face last Christmas. You've joked about Zoe's free money more times than I can count. I always thought it was mean, but I figured it was just how your family worked." "It is how our family works," Derek said quietly. "And that's the problem." My mother had tears in her eyes. Zoe, I'm so sorry. I thought I was raising you kids to support each other, but somehow I created this situation where you give everything and get nothing back. It's not that I get nothing back. I get guilt when I hesitate, pressure when I resist, and assumptions that I'll always be available to solve problems that aren't mine. I get treated like the family employee instead of the family daughter. How do we fix this?
Derek asked. How do we change a dynamic that's been going on for years? It was a good question, and I realized I didn't have a complete answer. I'd focused so much energy on making them understand the problem that I hadn't thought much about solutions. I think it starts with you all recognizing that I'm a whole person with my own life, my own goals, my own financial limitations. When you want something from me, money, help, problem solving, you need to ask, not assume. You need to accept that sometimes I might say no, and that doesn't make me selfish or unsupportive. What else? Brooke asked. Stop treating my money like it's communal property. Stop making plans that depend on my wallet without consulting me first. Stop guilting me when I express hesitation about expensive requests. And stop dismissing your feelings when you try to communicate with us, my father added. I can see now that we've been shutting you down instead of listening. I need to feel like an equal member of this family, not like the designated problem solver who's expected to fund everyone else's dreams. You are an equal member, my mother said quickly. Then treat me like one. Include me in planning conversations instead of just presenting me with bills. Ask about my life instead of just updating me on your problems. Show interest in my goals and dreams instead of assuming I don't have any. The conversation continued for another hour, covering years of accumulated resentments and misunderstanding. For the first time in my adult life, my family was really listening to me, really considering my perspective, really acknowledging that they'd been treating me badly. As I prepared to leave, Brooke caught my arm. Zoe, I have one more question. Okay. Why did you fix it at the end? Why did you arrange for the room upgrade and the boat trip? I thought about it for a moment. Because even though I wanted you to learn a lesson, I didn't want to destroy you. You're still my family. I still love you. Even when you hurt, I wanted you to understand consequences, not to have your vacation completely ruined. That's what makes you a better person than any of us deserve, she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. You're not bad people, I said. You just lost sight of how your actions affected me, but you can do better now that you understand. The drive home to my apartment was peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since I could remember, I felt like my family actually saw me as a person rather than a function. The conversation had been difficult, but it had also been real in a way our family interactions rarely were. Over the next few days, the changes were subtle but noticeable. Derek called to check on me without needing anything. Brooke sent me a funny meme with no hidden agenda. My mother invited me to lunch just to catch up, not to discuss family business or ask for favors. The real test came the following weekend when my father's car broke down. In the past, the family would have automatically assumed I'd either pay for repairs or let him borrow my car indefinitely. Instead, Derek called to update me on the situation and ask if I had any recommendations for mechanics. We're handling it ourselves, he said when I offered to help. Dad has savings for car repairs, and if he needs to borrow a car for a few days, Brooke and I can work out a schedule. You don't need to solve this for us. The novelty of not being expected to fix their problems was almost disorienting. I'd grown so accustomed to being the family's go-to problem solver that I hardly knew how to respond when they handled things themselves. A week later, Brooke asked if I wanted to get coffee, just the two of us. We met at a cafe in Hawthorne not far from my apartment, and for the first time in years, she seemed genuinely interested in my life. Tell me about your job, she said, as we settled into a corner table. I mean, really tell me. What do you actually do all day? So I told her about campaign development, about building relationships with hotel chains and tourism boards, about the creative process of making destinations appealing to travelers. I told her about the projects I was proud of, the clients who'd become friends, the satisfaction of helping people discover new places. "You're really good at this," she said when I finished. "I had no idea your work was so complex and creative. You never asked before." "I know. I'm asking now." She paused, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "Zoe, what do you want? I mean, what are your goals and dreams? What would make you happy?" It was such a simple question, but no one in my family had ever asked it before. I found myself talking about my dream of starting my own travel consulting business, about places I wanted to visit, about the apartment I was saving to buy, about the life I was trying to build for myself. "Why haven't you started your own business yet?" she asked. "Money, mostly. It takes capital to start a consulting firm, and I've been using my savings to—" I stopped, realizing what I was about to say. "To fund our emergencies and vacations, and lifestyle choices," she finished quietly. "God. Zoe, we've been stealing your dreams." "You weren't stealing them. I was giving them away." "Same result. You've been sacrificing your own goals to fund ours." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "How much would you need to start your business?" "Brooke, I'm not telling you that so you can offer to help. That's not what this conversation is about." "I know, but I'm asking because I want to understand what we've cost you. I want to know what you've given up for us." I told her about the business plan I'd developed, about the clients I already had lined up, about the office space I'd been dreaming of renting. I told her that I'd been ready to take the leap 2 years ago, before Derek's business loan request ate up my startup fund. $15,000, she said when I finished. "You could have started your business with the money you spent on our vacation." "Yeah." She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee. "I'm going to pay you back, Brooke. You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Not because you're demanding it, but because it's the right thing to do. That money represented your dreams, your future, your freedom. I'm going to find a way to give it back to you." "How?" "You said yourself that you and Trevor are still recovering from wedding expenses." "I'll figure it out. I'll get a second job, sell some stuff, cut back on expenses, whatever it takes." She met my eyes with a determination I'd rarely seen from her. "I'm not going to be the reason you can't pursue your dreams anymore." Over the following weeks, the entire family seemed to undergo a transformation. Derek started a monthly payment plan to repay money he'd borrowed over the year. My parents began planning their social activities around their own budget, rather than assuming I'd cover the difference. Even Trevor started contributing to family dinners instead of just showing up and eating. The most significant change was in how they talked to me. Instead of assuming I'd solve their problems, they asked for advice. Instead of dismissing my concerns, they listened. Instead of treating me like a resource, they treated me like a person. One evening in November, about a month after their return from Turks and Caicos, my mother called with an unusual request. "Zoe, I want to take you shopping for your birthday next week. Not to buy you something from my budget, but to actually shop together. I want to learn about your style, your preferences, the things you like." I realized I don't really know those things about you. "You don't have to do that, Mom. I've been thinking about all the birthdays where I bought you practical gifts, or just gave you cash because I didn't know what you'd actually enjoy. I want to do better." We spent Saturday afternoon wandering through downtown Portland, visiting bookstores and art galleries and clothing boutiques. My mother listened as I talked about authors I loved, paintings that moved me, styles that made me feel confident. She asked thoughtful questions about my preferences and opinions, treating me like someone whose taste and judgment matter. "You have excellent instincts," she said, as we sat in a cafe, surrounded by shopping bags. "How did I never notice that before?" "You weren't looking," I said gently. "You were so focused on Brooke and Derek and their bigger personalities that you missed the smaller, quieter things about me." "I'm looking now. I know. I can tell." That evening she called the rest of the family and told them about our day, sharing details about my interests and preferences, like they were discoveries worth celebrating. For the first time in my life I felt like my mother was proud of me for who I was, rather than what I could do for others. December brought an unexpected conversation with Derek. He'd been thinking about our family dynamics, he said, and he'd realized something important. "Zoe, I think we trained you to be invisible, not on purpose, but that's what happened. We were so loud and demanding that you learned to be quiet and accommodating.
We took up so much space that you learned to make yourself small. I think you're right, but you're not small. You're not quiet. You're not invisible. You just learned to hide those parts of yourself because we didn't leave room for them." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want you to know that I see you now, the real you, and I like who you are when you're not trying to manage everyone else's problems." Who am I when I'm not managing everyone else's problems? You're funny, you're creative, you're incredibly smart about things I never even thought about. You're kind without being a pushover. You're strong without being harsh. He smiled. "You're someone I'd want to be friends with even if we weren't related." It was the first time any of my siblings had expressed genuine appreciation for my personality rather than my usefulness. The compliment meant more to me than all the thank yous I'd received over the years for solving their problems. Christmas that year was different. Instead of the usual pattern of expensive gifts that stretched everyone's budget, we'd agreed to focus on thoughtful, personal presents. Brooke gave me a beautiful leather portfolio for my future business. Derek surprised me with a framed photo of the two of us from childhood, back when he used to look up to me instead of expecting me to look after him. My parents gave me something even more valuable, a commitment to fund a family therapy session, so we could continue working on our communication patterns with professional guidance. "We don't want to slip back into old habits," my mother explained. "We want to make sure we keep treating you like the important, valuable person you are." The most meaningful gift came from the entire family together, a business consultation with a lawyer who specialized in helping people start small firms. They'd pooled their money to pay for the session, and Brooke had researched the best attorney in Portland for what I was trying to accomplish. "We can't give you back all the time and energy and money you've spent on us over the years," she said as I opened the envelope with the attorney's information, "but we can help you move forward with your dream." As the year ended, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed since that phone call in October. I'd gone from being the family's invisible problem solver to being seen as a whole person, with my own goals and dreams. I'd learned to use my voice instead of suffering in silence. I'd discovered that sometimes the people you love need to experience consequences before they can learn to treat you better. The most important thing I'd learned was that I didn't have to choose between standing up for myself and maintaining relationships with my family. I could do both. I could set boundaries while still showing love. I could demand respect while still offering support. I could be strong without being cruel. My family had needed to lose their paradise vacation to understand that they'd been taking their actual paradise, having me in their lives, for granted. But now that they understood, we were building something better than what we'd had before. We were building a relationship based on mutual respect instead of exploitation, on genuine care instead of convenient assumption. The canceled flights had led to something more valuable than any vacation. They'd led to a family that finally saw me for who I really was. The lawyer's office in downtown Portland was everything I'd imagined when I dreamed about starting my own business. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Willamette River, and the conference table where I sat was polished to a mirror shine. Janet Morrison, the attorney my family had found for me, was explaining the legal requirements for establishing a travel consulting firm while I took notes in the leather portfolio Brooke had given me for Christmas. "The good news is that your industry experience and existing client relationships put you in an excellent position to succeed," Janet was saying. "You already have the credibility and connections that most new consultants spend years building." I nodded, still somewhat amazed that I was actually sitting in this office, actually taking concrete steps toward the dream I'd been postponing for years. "What about startup costs? I know I'll need business insurance, office space, technology infrastructure. Based on what you've told me about your business model, I'd estimate you're looking at about $12,000 to $15,000 in initial expenses. That covers incorporation fees, insurance, basic technology setup, and 3 months of office rent. After that, your main expenses will be ongoing office costs and marketing." $12,000 to $15,000, exactly what I'd spent on my family's vacation. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it no longer stung the way it once had. That money had taught my family a valuable lesson about treating people with respect, and now they were working together to help me pursue my goals. Over the past month, each family member had started contributing to what Brooke had dubbed the Zoe Freedom Fund. Derek was sending me $200 every week from his business profits. Brooke had taken a weekend job at an upscale boutique and was saving every penny. My parents had started selling items they no longer needed and adding the proceeds to my business fund. The progress was slow but steady, and more importantly, it represented something I'd never experienced before: my family actively supporting my dreams, instead of expecting me to fund them. After the consultation with Janet, I walked through downtown Portland with a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. The January air was crisp and clear, and the city seemed full of potential rather than just familiar routine. I found myself looking at office buildings differently, imagining which spaces might work for Hartwell Travel Consulting. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb, my contact who had helped orchestrate the vacation disaster. "Coffee later? I have something interesting to discuss with you." We met at a cafe in the Pearl District, and Marcus arrived with a folder full of documents and an expression that suggested good news. "Zoe, I've been thinking about our conversation back in October, about how you used your professional network to teach your family a lesson. It got me wondering about something." He leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. "How would you feel about consulting for other people who are dealing with similar situations?" "What do you mean?" "I mean turning what you did into a legitimate business service. There are lots of people out there who get taken advantage of by family members, friends, business partners, people who need to teach someone a lesson about consequences, but don't have the industry connections to pull it off themselves." I stared at him, the idea slowly taking shape in my mind. "You're talking about using travel arrangements to create educational experiences for entitled people." "Exactly. Obviously nothing illegal or genuinely harmful, but creative customer service that helps people understand the impact of their behavior. You've got the skills, the connections, and the experience. Plus, you've proven that you can execute something like this flawlessly." The concept was intriguing, but it also felt potentially problematic. "Marcus, I can't build a business around ruining people's vacations. Not ruining them, adjusting them. Think about it as therapeutic travel consulting. You help people design experiences that teach valuable lessons about gratitude, respect, and consequences." He pulled out a business plan from his folder. "I've been working on this since November. Look at these numbers." The financial projections were impressive. Apparently, there was a significant market for what Marcus was calling corrective travel experiences. People who wanted to teach spoiled teenagers about privilege, business partners who needed to learn about accountability, extended family members who took advantage of others' generosity. "The key is that it's always consensual," Marcus explained. "The person requesting the service has to be someone who genuinely cares about the target's growth and development. We're not helping people get revenge. We're helping them provide educational experiences." I thought about my own family's transformation, about how their disastrous vacation had led to genuine growth and better relationships. It worked for my family because they were capable of learning and changing. Not everyone is. That's why we'd screen clients carefully. We'd only work with people who are trying to repair relationships, not destroy them. People who want to create positive change, not just cause pain. The idea stayed with me for the rest of the week. I found myself imagining different scenarios, different ways that carefully designed travel experiences could help people understand the consequences of their actions. A spoiled teenager who expected their parents to fund everything might benefit from experiencing budget travel accommodation. A business partner who consistently left others to handle problems might learn from having to navigate travel complications alone. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Marcus was right about one thing. I had proven skills in this area. I'd successfully coordinated a complex operation involving multiple people across different companies, and I'd achieved exactly the outcome I'd intended. My family had learned valuable lessons, and our relationships had improved dramatically as a result. Friday evening, Derek called with an update on his contribution to my business fund. "I just sent this week's payment," he said. "We should have about half of what you need by the end of March." "Derek, you don't have to keep doing this. I know it's a strain on your budget." "Zoe, it's not a strain, it's a priority. For the first time in my life, I'm actively contributing to your success instead of being a drain on your resources. It feels good. How are things going with your business? Really well, actually, better than I expected. And you know what's interesting? Now that I'm not constantly looking for financial bailouts from family, I'm making better business decisions. I'm more careful about expenses, more strategic about investments. Taking responsibility for my own problems has made me a better entrepreneur. The conversation made me think about unintended consequences of family dynamics. By always being available to solve their problems, I hadn't just been enabling their dependence on me, I'd been preventing them from developing their own problem-solving skills, their own resilience, their own sense of accountability. That weekend, I visited Mr. Ross at the bookstore. He was arranging a display of new releases, but he looked up with a smile when I entered. "Zoe, you look like someone with interesting news." I told him about the lawyer consultation, about my family's contributions to my business fund, and about Marcus's proposal for a corrective travel consulting service. "That's quite an evolution," he said thoughtfully. "From victim to victor, entrepreneur who helps other people become victors. Is it ethical, using travel arrangements to teach people lessons?" Mr. Ross considered the question while he continued arranging books.
I suppose it depends on the motivation and the method. If you're helping people create learning experiences that ultimately strengthen relationships and encourage personal growth, that seems valuable. If you're just helping people get sophisticated revenge, that's different. How do I tell the difference? Ask yourself this: would the world be a better place if the person receiving the lesson actually learned from it? If the answer is yes, if their growth would benefit them and the people around them, then you're probably on the right track. I spent the rest of February researching the travel industry's approach to customer service recovery, studying examples of how companies handled booking errors and accommodation problems. I was fascinated to discover that many of the situations Marcus and I had created for my family were actually common travel industry challenges. Overbooking, system errors, canceled activities, accommodation downgrades, these things happen naturally all the time. We'd simply arranged for them to happen intentionally. In March, Brooke asked me to meet her for lunch. She'd been working her weekend retail job for 3 months, and the experience had given her a new perspective on customer service and entitlement. "Zoe, you would not believe some of the customers I deal with," she said as we settled into a corner booth at a restaurant in Hawthorne. "People who think that spending money gives them the right to treat service workers like garbage. People who make impossible demands and then act shocked when they can't be accommodated." Sounds familiar. It is familiar. I used to be one of those people, not quite as bad as some of the customers I see now, but definitely someone who thought the world should bend to accommodate my expectations. She paused, stirring her soup thoughtfully. "Working retail has taught me more about empathy and respect than anything else I've ever done." "Is that why you're still doing it? Even though you've almost saved enough for my business fund?" "Partly, but also because I like the person I'm becoming. I like feeling useful in a way that doesn't depend on other people solving my problems. I like earning money instead of just spending it." She met my eyes across the table. "I think I needed this job as much as you needed that vacation disaster." The conversation reinforced my growing belief that sometimes people needed to experience discomfort in order to grow. My family had needed their travel disaster to understand how their behavior affected others. Brooke had needed the humbling experience of retail work to develop empathy and work ethic. Derek had needed to take full responsibility for his business problems to become a better entrepreneur. In April, Marcus and I had lunch to discuss his business proposal one more time. I'd spent months thinking about it, and I'd reached a decision. "I want to do it," I said, "but with very specific parameters. We only work with clients who can demonstrate a genuine desire to improve relationships. We require follow-up consultations to ensure that the experience led to positive changes, and we have a strict ethics committee to review every case." An ethics committee? You, me, and a licensed family therapist. Every potential client has to be approved by all 3 of us. If any one of us has concerns about the motivation or likely outcome, we don't take the case. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "I love it. a travel consulting service with built-in ethical oversight. It's like therapeutic intervention meets hospitality management. We spent the afternoon outlining the business model, discussing potential partnerships with therapists and family counselors, and planning our client screening process. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear vision for how this could work as a legitimate, helpful service rather than a sophisticated revenge operation. The first test case came in May. A woman named Patricia contacted us about her adult son, who had been living at home for 3 years while finding himself, but was actually just taking advantage of his parents' generosity. He'd been demanding increasingly expensive experiences, ski trips, beach vacations, music festivals, while contributing nothing to household expenses and showing no initiative to become independent. "I love my son," Patricia explained during our consultation, "but I'm enabling his entitlement, and it's not helping him become a responsible adult. I want to show him what it's like when things don't just magically work out." The ethics committee, Marcus, myself, and Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist I'd found through professional networks, reviewed the case carefully. Patricia's motivation was clearly loving concern rather than punitive anger. Her son was capable of learning and growing, he just hadn't been forced to do so. And the likely outcome was positive development, rather than damaged relationships. We designed an experience where Patricia's son would think he was going on a luxury ski trip to Aspen, but would actually find himself at a budget ski area in Oregon with basic accommodations and no amenity. He'd have to figure out equipment rentals, meal planning, and activity booking himself, without his mother's usual intervention. The result was exactly what we'd hoped for. After 2 days of struggling with problems he'd never had to solve before, Patricia's son called his mother with genuine appreciation for everything she typically handled for him. The experience led to productive conversations about responsibility, independence, and mutual respect. More importantly, 3 months later, he'd found a job and started contributing to household expenses. The travel experience had been a catalyst for genuine personal growth. Word spread through professional networks, and by summer, Hartwell Travel Consulting was booking several corrective experiences per month. We worked with parents trying to teach spoiled teenagers about privilege, business partners trying to address accountability issues, and family members trying to break patterns of exploitation and dependence. Each case was different, but the underlying principle was always the same. Sometimes people needed to experience consequences in order to understand the impact of their behavior on others. The financial success of the business was gratifying, but the real satisfaction came from the follow-up reports. Clients consistently reported improved relationships, better communication, and positive behavioral changes in the people who'd received corrective experiences. In August, exactly 10 months after my family's disastrous vacation, we held our first annual family dinner at my new apartment. I'd moved to a larger place in the Pearl District, with space for a home office and a dining room that could accommodate everyone comfortably. The conversation that evening was unlike any family gathering I could remember. Instead of the usual pattern of complaints and crisis management, we talked about accomplishments, goals, and plans for the future. Derek updated us on his business growth. Brooke talked about her promotion at the boutique and her plans to eventually open her own shop. My parents shared their travel plans for a vacation they were funding themselves, and I told them about Hartwell Travel Consulting, about the clients we were helping, about the satisfaction of using my skills to create positive change in people's lives. "I'm proud of you," my father said when I finished describing the business. "You've turned a difficult situation into something that helps other people. That takes wisdom and compassion." "I learned from the best," I said, looking around the table at my family. "You all taught me that sometimes the people you love need to experience consequences before they can learn to do better. We also learned that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones with the most to teach you." My mother added softly. As the evening wound down and my family prepared to leave, Brooke pulled me aside. "Zoe, I have something for you." She handed me an envelope with my name written in her careful script. Inside was a check for $15,000, the exact amount I'd spent on their vacation the year before. "Brooke, this is too much. You've already been contributing to my business fund. This isn't a contribution, this is repayment. Trevor and I took out a small loan to cover it. We'll pay it off over the next year, but I wanted you to have this money back now." Her eyes were bright with tears. "You spent your dreams on our vacation. The least I can do is give you back the money, so you can pursue those dreams. You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did, not because you demanded it, but because it was the right thing to do, because you deserve to have your generosity honored instead of exploited." That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my new apartment, looking at the check and thinking about everything that had changed. A year ago, I'd been the invisible family member, the one who gave and gave without recognition or respect. Now I was the owner of a successful consulting business, living in my dream apartment, and enjoying genuine relationships with family members who saw me as an equal. The canceled flights had been the beginning of everything. They'd forced my family to confront their behavior, and they'd forced me to discover my own power. But more than that, they'd led to the creation of something meaningful, a business that helped other people break destructive patterns and build healthier relationships. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people is let them experience the natural consequences of their actions. Sometimes love looks like allowing people to face the problems they've created, instead of rushing in to fix everything for them. And sometimes the person who seems powerless is actually the one with the most power of all. They just need to learn how to use it. Standing at my window, looking out at the Portland skyline, I realized that I'd never felt more grateful for a canceled vacation in my life. Those canceled flights had changed everything, and everything they'd changed was better than what had come before. 2 years later, I stood in the lobby of the Marriott, downtown, waiting for my newest client to arrive. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric patterns across the polished marble floor. Hartwell Travel Consulting had grown beyond anything I'd imagined when Marcus first suggested turning my family's vacation disaster into a business model. The woman who approached me looked exactly like I'd expected from our phone conversations, polished, professional, but with worried lines around her eyes that spoke of family stress. Margaret Sullivan was a successful real estate attorney, whose younger brother had been draining her bank account for years with increasingly elaborate sob stories and financial emergencies. "Ms. Hartwell, thank you so much for meeting me. I have to admit, when my therapist recommended your services, I wasn't sure this was real." I smiled, understanding her skepticism. "I get that reaction a lot. Why don't we sit down and I'll explain exactly how this works." We settled into comfortable chairs in a quiet corner of the lobby. Margaret pulled out a folder thick with documentation, bank statements, text message screenshots, a timeline of her brother's financial requests over the past 5 years. The pattern was depressingly familiar. "Kevin is 34 years old, and he's never gone more than 6 months without asking me for money," she began. "It started small after college, help with rent, car repairs, medical bills, but now he's asking for thousands at a time. Last month he convinced me to pay for a business development trip to San Francisco that turned out to be a vacation with his girlfriend." I reviewed her documentation while she talked. Kevin's requests followed a predictable escalation pattern, increasing amounts, shorter intervals between asks, and increasingly elaborate justification. Most concerning was the emotional manipulation evident in his messages: guilt about family loyalty, urgency about deadlines, and veiled threats about their relationship if she didn't comply. "What made you decide to contact us?" My therapist helped me see that I'm not helping Kevin by constantly bailing him out. I'm enabling his irresponsibility and preventing him from developing real problem-solving skills. But every time I try to say no, he makes me feel like I'm abandoning family. She paused, looking out the window. "I love my brother, but I can't keep living like this. I need him to understand how his behavior affects me." Margaret's case met all our criteria for acceptance. Her motivation was genuinely loving rather than punitive. Kevin was capable of learning and growth. He just hadn't been forced to develop those skills, and the likely outcome was improved family relationships rather than permanent damage. Chan, our ethics committee therapist, had already conducted a phone consultation with Margaret to assess the family dynamics and ensure this was an appropriate intervention. Marcus had researched Kevin's travel patterns and preferences to design an experience that would be educational without being cruel. "Here's what we're proposing," I said, pulling out our recommendation packet. "Kevin has been talking about wanting to take a solo trip to Europe to find himself
and explore potential business opportunities. He's expecting you to fund this adventure, correct? He's already sent me a detailed itinerary, 2 weeks in London, Paris, and Rome, first-class flights, luxury hotels, exclusive dining experiences. He calculated it would cost about $18,000 and sent me a payment schedule. Perfect. We're going to give him exactly what he's asking for, a solo trip to Europe to discover who he really is when he doesn't have family to bail him out of problems. I outlined the plan we'd developed. Kevin would receive confirmation for his dream European vacation, but the reality would be quite different. Instead of luxury accommodations in major cities, he'd find himself in budget hostels in smaller towns. Instead of first-class flights, he'd be taking buses and trains with multiple connections. Instead of having restaurant reservations made for him, he'd need to figure out meals on a backpacker's budget. The key is that nothing will be impossible, I explained. He'll have accommodation and transportation, just not the luxury he's expecting. He'll have enough money for food and basic activities, but he'll need to make careful choices and prioritize his spending. Most importantly, when problems arise, and they will, he'll have no family member to call for rescue. Margaret listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. What if he just comes home early? That's his choice. But we'll make sure his return flight isn't changeable without significant fees that he'll have to pay himself, and you'll be unavailable to solve travel problems for him. You'll be on your own vacation, completely unreachable. My own vacation? Part of our survey. While Kevin is learning about independence in Europe, you'll be enjoying a relaxing week at a spa resort in Arizona. No phone service, no internet access, no way for him to contact you when things don't go according to his plan. The idea of being truly unavailable during a family crisis seemed to both terrify and thrill Margaret. For years she'd been Kevin's emergency contact, his problem solver, his financial backup plan. The thought of simply not being there when he needed rescue was revolutionary. We spent another hour discussing logistics, ethical boundaries, and expected outcomes. Margaret would tell Kevin that she'd decided to support his European adventure, but that she was also taking her own vacation and would be completely unreachable. Kevin would receive detailed confirmation emails for luxury accommodations and experiences that would mysteriously transform into budget alternatives upon his arrival. The goal isn't to punish him, I emphasize. It's to give him the opportunity to discover his own resilience and problem-solving abilities. Many of our clients are surprised to learn that the people they've been enabling are actually quite capable when forced to be. 3 weeks later, I received daily updates from our European contacts as Kevin's adventure unfolded. The progression was almost exactly what we'd predicted based on previous cases. Day 1. Confusion and anger upon discovering his luxury London hotel was actually a clean but basic hostel in a suburb requiring an hour's commute to the city center. Multiple attempts to contact Margaret, all going to voice. Day 2. Frustration with public transportation and budget constraints. Kevin had apparently never used a city bus system or figured out meal planning on a limited budget. Day 3. The beginning of adaptation. Kevin started researching free activities and figuring out the most cost-effective ways to move around London. Day 4. First signs of genuine engagement with his experience. He posted on social media about discovering a fascinating local museum that wasn't in any tourist guide. By day 7, when Kevin arrived in his assigned small French town instead of Paris, he was already developing travel skills and independence we hadn't expected. Rather than panicking about the accommodation mix-up, he'd learned to negotiate with hostel staff and had even made friends with other budget travelers. The real transformation came in week 2. Kevin's social media posts shifted from complaints about travel problems to genuine enthusiasm about his adventures. He wrote about conversations with locals, about discovering amazing food at neighborhood markets, about the satisfaction of solving transportation puzzles himself. Most tellingly, he stopped trying to contact Margaret. The daily phone calls and desperate voicemails tapered off, replaced by occasional cheerful updates about his experiences. Margaret, meanwhile, was having her own revelation at the Arizona spa resort. I hadn't realized how much mental energy I was spending managing Kevin's crises, she told me during our check-in call. For the first time in years, I'm not worried about what financial emergency he might have today. I'm actually relaxed. When Kevin returned from Europe, he was a different person, tanned, confident, and full of stories about problem solving and independence. More importantly, he was grateful rather than entitled. "Margaret, I have to thank you for this trip," he said during their reunion dinner. "It was nothing like what I expected, but it was exactly what I needed. I learned that I'm actually capable of handling problems myself instead of always calling you." "What was the most important thing you learned?" "That asking for help should be the last resort, not the first option. I spent years treating you like my personal customer service department, instead of developing my own life skills." He paused, looking genuinely remorseful. "I'm sorry I put so much pressure on you. I didn't realize how stressful it must have been to constantly worry about my latest crisis." 6 months later, Kevin had found steady employment and hadn't asked Margaret for money once. Their relationship had transformed from a pattern of dependence and resentment to genuine friendship and mutual respect. Margaret's case became one of our most successful examples, and word continued to spread through therapeutic and professional networks. By the end of our second year, Hartwell Travel Consulting was handling cases across the country, partnering with family therapists, financial counselors, and relationship experts. The diversity of our clients was remarkable. We'd worked with parents whose adult children had never learned independence, business partners dealing with accountability issues, and extended families struggling with exploitation patterns. Each case was unique, but the underlying principle remained constant. Sometimes people needed to experience natural consequences in order to understand the impact of their behavior. Not every case was successful. We'd learned to identify clients whose family members weren't capable of growth or learning, and we'd developed protocols for managing situations where corrective experiences led to permanent relationship damage rather than healing. Our ethics committee met monthly to review outcomes and refine our screening processes. The most rewarding aspect of the work wasn't the financial success, though the business had exceeded all my projections. It was the follow-up reports from clients whose relationships had genuinely improved after corrective travel experiences. Dr. Chen had begun incorporating our services into her therapeutic practice, using corrective travel as one tool in a broader approach to addressing family dysfunction. "What you've created is essentially exposure therapy for entitlement," she explained during one of our planning meetings. "You're giving people safe opportunities to experience consequences and develop resilience." Meanwhile, my own family continued to thrive under our new dynamic. Derek's business had grown to the point where he was considering expanding to a second location. Brooke had indeed opened her own boutique and was mentoring other young entrepreneurs. My parents had developed an active social life that didn't depend on managing their children's crises. Most importantly, our family gatherings had become genuine celebrations rather than crisis management sessions. We talked about achievements, plans, and dreams rather than problems, obligations, and emergencies. The third anniversary of my family's disastrous Turks and Caicos vacation fell on a crisp October day. I spent the morning at Powell's Books, visiting Mr. Ross and reflecting on everything that had changed since that phone call from Brooke 3 years earlier. "Any regrets?" Mr. Ross asked as we shared coffee in the familiar bookstore cafe. "About my family's vacation disaster? None at all. About waiting so long to stand up for myself? Plenty." I looked around the bookstore where I'd first begun planning my revenge. "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd found my voice earlier, if I'd learned to set boundaries before things got so bad. Maybe you weren't ready earlier. Maybe you needed to reach that breaking point before you could find the strength to change everything. All I know is that canceling their flights was the best decision I ever made." That evening, my family gathered at my apartment for our monthly dinner. The conversation flowed easily, covering Brooke's latest business ventures, Derek's expansion plans, and my parents' upcoming trip to visit old friends in Seattle. As we cleared the dishes, Brooke pulled me aside with a familiar expression of mischief. "Zoe, I have a confession to make." "What now?" "Remember how I used to call you the family ATM behind your back?" I nodded, the memory no longer stinging the way it once had. "Well, now Trevor and I have a new name for you. Should I be worried?" We call you the family CFO, Chief Family Officer, because you didn't just teach us to treat you better, you taught us to treat each other better, to communicate honestly, to solve our own problems." She grinned. "You reorganized this entire family and we're all better for it." As my family prepared to leave that evening, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the Portland skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars, and the Willamette River reflected the glow from the bridges. 3 years ago I'd been the invisible family member, the one who gave endlessly without recognition or respect. I'd been someone who said yes to everything, and no to nothing, who prioritized everyone else's dreams, while postponing my own. Now I was the owner of a successful consulting business that helped other people break destructive family patterns. I lived in my dream apartment, traveled regularly for both business and pleasure, and enjoyed genuine relationships with family members who valued me as an equal. The canceled flights had been the catalyst for everything. They'd forced my family to confront their behavior, forced me to discover my own power, and ultimately led to the creation of something meaningful that helped other families transform their relationship. I'd learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people is let them experience the consequences of their actions. Sometimes love looks like stepping back and allowing people to solve their own problems instead of rushing in to fix everything for them. And sometimes the person who appears to have the least power is actually the one with the most. They just need to learn how to use it. My phone buzzed with a text from a potential new client, someone whose adult son had been taking advantage of her generosity for years, and was now demanding she fund his wedding to a woman he'd known for 3 months. Another family trapped in patterns of exploitation and guilt, another opportunity to help people discover healthier ways of relating to each other. I smiled and opened my laptop to schedule a consultation. Tomorrow I'd help another family learn what mine had discovered 3 years ago. That real love sometimes requires letting people experience the natural consequences of their choices, and that the most powerful gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength. The canceled flights had taught us all that paradise isn't a place you visit, it's the peace you feel when you finally know your worth and refuse to accept anything less than the respect you deserve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.